This week on the Walk On podcast, talk about your journey to decide to launch NXTMOVES and tell us a little bit about NXTMOVES.
The first thing I would tell anybody is that, don't read the stats on it. It's not, 95% of businesses don't make it and only 1% actually make $1 million or more. So, but you have to go all the way. It really takes all your energy, all your being and everything you got to work and make it successful. You're raising a baby. So it's like that baby comes out, it doesn't survive unless you're feeding it, you're holding it, you're nurturing it. How are you going to get this little one to survive and get up and walk and be able to take a vacation someday because it can actually feed itself?
I love that metaphor. I've never really thought of entrepreneurship that way, but it's true. And it is, as a result, all consuming. Hello, and welcome to the Walk On podcast. This is going to be the last episode of season 4. Can't believe we're at season 4 already. Super thrilled about having my first joint guests on. We haven't had multiple people, so this is going to be great. We'll work without a net a little bit here. But for those of you that are new, the Walk On podcast really started as a journey for me to find out what was next later in my career. Read a lot of books, listened to a lot of podcasts, and remembered that I quite enjoyed being on TV in some previous roles and on radio. And so podcasting was a natural progression. I've got some big business announcements coming up, so I'll share those in another episode. But that's the podcast, and I get the good fortune of interviewing people who are living their passion, leading with purpose. And so I'm thrilled today to have two guests, Steve Nigri, Walter Hoffmann, founders of NXTMOVES. I met these gentlemen a couple years ago now at this point through a client. And they're another one of the folks that I had the pleasure of touring Ireland with. We may get into some of those stories. We may not. Good time. Business travel can be really great, especially when you have good people. So I'm going to let Steve and Walt introduce themselves, but they're really going on an exciting entrepreneurial journey. They've launched a new company in the payments space. And I've been able to, over the last 18 months or so, watch their explosive growth. And they're going to tell us about how they got there. So guys, welcome on.
Good to be here, Michael.
Thanks,
you for
Michael.
having
Appreciate
us.
it. Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Of course. Well, why don't you tell the group a little bit more about you? And I don't know if you guys arm wrestled or drew straws about who's going to go first, but I'll leave it up to you.
I'll let Steve go.
A pleasure to be here. Really I've been listening to it. It's your podcast is great. Happy to be a part of it. My background starts, if you go from the very beginning, I was right out of college. I went into selling golf cars to golf courses. So it sounds like this really a great job until you realize you have to drive over 8 states and you get 50,000 miles a year on windshield time. And I was like, this is not so good. But I was very fortunate to start my career with 2 ex-IBM guys. And if you know anything about IBM, they train, and then when they're done doing that, they train some more. And so, up in your region, you're probably a little familiar with, the IBM model. And so, walk around the office and signs of think everywhere. And, so I was very fortunate to have two mentors that, were able to get me out of the box and teaching me sales and teaching me business solutions and business development and, how to start the beginning stages of building a business and being an entrepreneur. And then from there, I left there. I went to New York City. I worked for a company called Wolters Kluwer for a little bit and for a while, and really learned the big corporate world and what it's like. Got to go overseas and work with people, and that was awesome and exciting. As you talked about a little earlier, we'll have to get into that. And then and then from there, I went into my first entrepreneurial business where we started a business from the scratch in the payment in the digital banking space. And we did that right at the time of 2008. So if you ever want to start a business at the wrong time, start a banking business in 2008.
Well chosen. Good timing, buddy.
Yeah. So then, for 10 years, started that with hair and no grays. And, 10 years later, we exited to a company called Jack Henry. And then from there, I went deep into payments with a company called Bilgo. It was billing solutions. Think of it, like low-lying bill.com sort of stuff. And then, went to a company called Move Financial, which Move was low-lying infrastructure deep in the weeds. And for any bankers who are on here, it's, if you're trying to start Fiserv from the ground up, that would be the ambition of that, and learned a lot, and then got to NXTMOVES, which we'll talk about later. So
yeah, that's awesome.
my journey.
Thanks for that background. That's an exciting journey, and look forward to hearing about what's next.
So Walter Hoffmann. So I started my career actually at Jack Henry about 20 years ago. So when I started at Jack Henry, literally I took an interview request from a buddy of mine. It's like, hey, you should come get a job here. And I was like, sure. And, I don't know anything about banking or technology or banking software for that matter, as I went to school for like logistics. But I said, sure, why not? Let's go ahead and jump in. So lucky enough, out of 100 candidates, I was the one who got the job. And the role position was really to try to figure out how to build a partnership ecosystem. At the time, Jack Henry had the Scimitar brand at that time, which is a credit union brand. They were trying to figure out how to better integrate third-party vendors. As an example, like Steve's company, Gizio, that PFM company, they're better trying to figure out a way to like better integrate online banking tools or IVR call center tools. And so I built what is known as the vendor integration program for Jack Henry about 20 years ago. Got some time to manage that at a corporate level for about 8 years, had a good time, signed up a couple hundred different partnerships for the company. From there, I went international. So I went to an organization called CRIF, which is the 4th largest credit bureau in the world. Got to manage partner ecosystem for Western Europe, North America, and got to see a lot of crazy stuff with how credit bureaus actually get built from the ground up in emerging markets and countries. So that was really fun. Also, it wasn't a bad stick because I got to go to Bologna, Italy, like once a quarter for about 5-6 years. So
I feel so bad for you. That sounds awful.
It was really horrible, really horrible. Loved my time there. Got a chance to become a chief product officer and SVP for an organization called CCMC, which basically was a middleware platform that normalized integrations between 42 different core banking systems in the US and about 300 different ancillary products. So that was really fun to do. Saw that organization go through an acquisition, through an M&A activity, and then also, got to build up brand new products from the ground up, do huge amounts of migration, really run part of the P&L and overall company strategy for the organization, sales, marketing, everything you can think of. And so that gave me a lot of great experience. Steve was actually working at Move Financial, and he's like, hey, you want to do something crazy and come learn more about payments? I was like, sure, let's do this. So went over to Move Financial, got to manage special project, which was anything crazy that the CEO thought of, and mainly handle a lot of our relationships with some of our institutions, as well as all our sales engineering aspects. So got to really solutionize large deals for organizations like Coca-Cola, Geico, and build out, real brand new payment infrastructure for large Fortune 100 companies. So it was a fantastic time to be able to learn there. It was like getting a graduate degree in payments. Every single day you woke up and learned something new. But Steve and I had the opportunity to kind of start our own thing, and that's where we're at right now with NXTMOVES.
Well, thanks for those really impressive resume and background explanation. So as we move on to the next part of learning a little bit more about NXTMOVES, and I'd really love to hear about, how you decided to make the jump as an entrepreneur, what that process is like. But if you'd also explain a little bit about payments and why it matters. I think payments are a little bit like, electricity, right? Like nobody wants to know what a power plant does, but they do if the light switch doesn't flip, the lights don't come on when you flip the switch, right? It's this ubiquitous thing. And I always talk about payments as sort of the plumbing of the ones and zeros of moving money around the world. So tell us a little bit more about your company, give us a brief overview there and really why it matters. And then let's talk about that entrepreneurial jump.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you want to talk about the payments?
Yeah, I'll talk about the payment side of things. Sure. So, payments are kind of like electricity in the sense of that, when you think about the underlying infrastructure, that's the ones and zeros of all the data and information that goes around, whether it's locally here in the United States or on a global level. Payments are, the underlying infrastructure of the financial sector and financial aspect of the planet, right? There are literally trillions of dollars that changes hands on a daily basis at a global level. When you think about global economy, scale, trade, anything that's happening, and all of that has to be, all that money has to be moved around in some way, shape, or form, right? And what we do as a payments organization is really kind of focus in on what are the main payment systems that you need to be able to be familiar with, whether that's, as an example, card acquiring or acceptance, merchant processing. That is the ability to whether you're a retailer online and doing a card not present, which is you're just putting your card digits into the keyboard and you go ahead and, accepting payment to buy a sweatshirt online, or you're actually dipping your chip electronically at a restaurant, that's acceptance. The actual ability to create cards, which is what we call card issuance, where, you have to have bank sponsors behind the scenes helping you kind of launch these programs and all those minutiae that goes along with it. Banks themselves are really the infrastructure pipes, or maybe the power plants around the world, right, to help us move money around. And there's a huge amount of infrastructure that goes along with it. You can spend years learning it and it always continues to change. I think the main important thing is that payments really do happen every second of every day at a scale that is completely ridiculous to think about. And it really helps kind of, it helps us keep going on a daily basis, right? It really does. The money moving around the planet is vital for how our economies and everything thrives. So the infrastructure associated, it's really fun to learn about, especially if you can tap into the market where you can figure out maybe how to help make certain components a bit better. Can't change everything overnight, but if you can help people out in the process, payments can be really, really fun.
Yeah. I sort of, not to get too far in the weeds, but, it feels like we're at the last decade certainly has been one of the most transformational times in the history of money in the world. I think about, as you were talking, I remember a decade ago sitting in my condo, Atlanta. I wanted to buy a sweatshirt from the Liverpool Football Club, main store. And it kept getting declined, right? Because it's this international transaction. And now, a mere 10 years later, you can do that from your phone while you're, waiting for a bus or whatever. And it's just ubiquitous and seamless. And so it just seems like, and I think you're living it on the tip of the spear, but there's just been this mass revolution in money at a pace that we haven't maybe seen, since the original bartering days.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. The last 5 years alone, you used to think about the amount of technology, especially with the emergence of AI being so prevalent now, huge amounts of, I would just say, generational leaps that have happened in technology in the last 10 years, 5 years itself. Even when you think about where, the market was back in the 70s, in the 70s, banks actually owned all of the merchant processing and acquiring that happened in this country. And now you have these giant technology, monolith infrastructures that kind of own the big companies that own all the processing, like Fiserv or with First Data and Global Pay. And so it's kind of changed hands, but it's still all there. It's just a matter of who's owning it and who's kind of in the lead right now from a technology perspective. So.
Yeah, I think payments is a lot like the electric company was a good way to say it, because it's, nobody puts it in perspective. They just want it to be easy, but they don't realize how really difficult it is. Payments is a very complicated business. It's very hard. That's why it can be quite lucrative to companies, but it's not easy to, break into or get into. It's a real niche of people who, really understand the infrastructure of, what the card rails really mean. The Visa and MasterCard have, specific rules about how they do things, and, which offers a lot of protections to the merchants. That's why when a lot of people talk about pay by bank, it's important to know that, what are the rules going to go with that? Like, what does that mean for the consumer? Is the consumer protected like they are on a Visa and MasterCard Discover rail?
So now that we've covered the industry a little bit, tell us about NXTMOVES, and I'm really curious about that entrepreneurial journey, right? You guys have linked up at another company, seem to be doing well, having good experiences, and you're like, hey, let's just go out there and I've used this metaphor before, and I'll use a PG version, but I try to explain entrepreneurship to people in the sort of, you grab your junk and jump in the river. Right? Like it's this, just see if we can swim. Do we sink? I've just got to, gird myself and jump in. So talk about your journey to decide to launch NXTMOVES, and tell us a little bit about NXTMOVES.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of ham and egg this, but one thing just first, like anybody who wants to start a business, and this is really the fourth startup that I've been a part of. The second one that, from the ground up, and the other two, I was very early on, I think, in the 30th employee and then the 9th employee, and the first forward facing. So the first thing I would tell anybody is that, don't read the stats on it. It's not, 95% of businesses don't make it, and only 1% actually make $1 million or more. So it's one of those things where, if you're looking at the numbers, it's not something you jump off the river into, but you have to go all the way. That's one thing, I talk to my wife about that a lot. It's hard. A lot of people try to start businesses by putting a toe in the water and kind of doing it part-time. Extremely difficult. It really takes all your energy, all your being, and everything you got to work and make it successful, because it just comes at you. It's it's you're raising a baby, so it's like that baby comes out, it doesn't survive unless you're feeding it, you're holding it, you're nurturing it. And you have to think of, you basically just had a new child, and how are you gonna get this little one to survive and get up and walk and be able to, you could take a vacation someday because it can actually feed itself, so
I love that metaphor. I've never really thought of entrepreneurship that way, but it's true. And it is, as a result, all consuming.
Yeah. And then when you go to raise money, people tell you that your baby's ugly, and you gotta grin it.
Don't talk about my baby that way.
Right.
Yeah. Then when you go to sell a company, they tell you your baby's ugly, but then they tell you they want to buy it.
So I love those analogies. Talk a little bit more about NXTMOVES and what you're doing in the industry.
Yeah. So Steve and I we both exited from Move Financial, and we were kind of literally dumbfounded looking at each other saying, what is it the thing that we want to do next? What were we really realizing from our experience with our previous employer, like what we learned? What did we actually see in the marketplace that kind of be maybe that was not necessarily addressed, or addressed in a way that we didn't feel was the correct way? Or, what do we really want to do? And we knew we wanted to be in payments. We knew from our backgrounds, as they started kind of in the community banking, community financial institution segment, that we wanted to also be in that landscape a little bit as well, but not directly. And literally over a cocktail, Steve and I were thinking about, what's our next thing going to be? And what's our next need going to be? And he's like, well, that's it. We're going to kind of start a company called NXTMOVES. We're going to be strategic and trying to help, businesses and financial institutions understand the payments landscape. Because if you're in payments and you're like, oh, I know payments, no one else does. Community banks don't know payments. Most commercial entities and businesses out there, they don't understand payments. And so there's a huge market for small, mid-tier, even large size enterprise businesses that need help with understanding payments a bit more. Banks definitely need it. There's not enough payment professionals in the US to actually go around and help all the banks become, I would just say, more savvy. And if you think about the last 40, 50 years in selling software to banks have been taught to not be product people. Banks have been bought to buy products off the shelf. And that's really easy for them to do because they don't have any liability to it. They're not really making giant, powerful decisions, so to speak, on software or technology. They just know to push buttons to get a function of what that bank needs to do done. And so, and payments is not one of those
play.
Things. Right. It's a safe play. And so for us, we started literally, what's our next move going to be? And that's how NXTMOVES as the name came up. And we spent, the first part of our journey, almost a full year, Steve and I, is literally just going around and interviewing banks about the problems that they're having with payments. Where do they see they need help with, or where they want to go, and where we could obviously just kind of bring, I would say, a better community of opportunities, commercial entities, fintech programs, whatever those might be, but bring those back to the bank to help the banks actually flourish. And I spent a year doing that for the first year of our existence.
Yeah, a painful year of very, very little income. We were doing advisory work too, and that's really like where we kind of got to the next side of NXTMOVES, as that because we talked about like how long could we do this without any technology or not having a platform. And when you start getting into when you're working with entities that are not fintechs, they don't have any infrastructure, they don't have any technology, but there's so many businesses out there that could use help with issuing, that could use help with acquiring. And we kept coming across all these businesses, and we just wind up realizing that we really couldn't truly help them or help them really change their experience without building a platform. And so that was when, we made the decision to actually, do a pre-seed and, raise some money and, prove out our idea that, we really can help community banks get connected better into payments, and we can help, mid-sized tier companies that, want to, start their own B2B services or start some, form of a payments card other than just using Amex. And, how can they get more money back and make more money from their receivables and payables? And how could they create maybe a better infrastructure that has better engagement for their customer base. And, we're fortunate. We get to have the most, one thing about being in payments is like, we've seen everything. We're working on a deal now that has Major League Baseball. We're working on a deal now that has major country stars. We're working on a deal that has, ticket infrastructure for large concert venues, festivals. On some of the fun side, we're working on some really dynamic real estate and insurance kind of lending. So it's the payments is fun in the way that like it touches everything, right? There's nobody who's not taking a payment for something. I mean, it's just the infrastructure of what we do. But I think we've really realized our little niche of what we can deliver and what we can bring. And part of that is a lot of people try to steamroll and go around banks. We truly understand banks. We appreciate banks. We understand what they can do for our communities, especially on the community level. So we want to help community banks around this country. And that's, for people who don't know, that's 10 billion and under, mainly in asset size, down even to, $500 million banks. And I know that kind of sounds crazy to the average person, but like if you know a local community bank, a lot of times the community is not necessarily big enough to support the bank anymore, and the bank's assets goes out there. So one of the things that we do is we work on a lot of different kind of credit products, and those credit products create overages so that other banks can buy that, like it gets packaged up. So for years, banks bought mortgages, right? They would package up mortgages, but that's not really profitable with the way the rates are, a lot of things that Rocket Mortgage has done and stuff like that. So they're looking for new ways to buy what most people call liabilities, they call assets. So,
All right. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, though. I want to start by recognizing, having been fellow travelers with you to Ireland and spent some time with you, I'm glad to hear that cocktails were involved in the start of the company. So that's one. Good job, guys. Two, though, I think it's really a great lesson. And you use the metaphor about birthing a baby. You put in a year of time to understand the industry and the opportunity. And I don't think, I think there's this sense of, well, I can just, God, if I see one more of these on Instagram, but hey, don't doom scroll tonight, take an hour and go sell things on Amazon, right? Like there's this, starting a company is simple. Working in your apartment post-COVID in your pajamas is easy. Building a real viable company and product takes work and investment. And I just want to call out and sort of double click that you spent a year talking to potential customers about their needs. And I think that's that puts you on the path of success, that investment in understanding the market in a way that maybe others don't.
Yeah, I think you really do have to do the research. And listen, anyone who tells you this is easy, it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Or, everybody tells you that, they started a business, but they have a full-time job. And if you have a full-time job, then you don't really own a business, that's just the way it is. We're talking about people who are really starting something from the ground up and want to build something. You've got to truly understand your market from top to bottom. You got to understand where all your competition is. You got to understand where it is that you're going to play so that you know how to build your business, because it's not like you're going to be able to do a jack of all things, especially as a young company. You have to be really focused on what it is you want to bring and deliver to the market, and then you can expand over time. But having that initial focus is so key, because, I joke around that it's like things are coming at you, but it's not that, anyone's trying to keep you down. It's just that the world's hard and it keeps spinning, and you got to keep adjusting to it. A lot of people think that, they get caught up on just their one idea and they don't iterate. You got to, where ideation and iteration are the key to constantly making sure that you're adjusting to what's going on as this, as your business world keeps turning and changing and tweaking.
Yeah. Doubling down on the ideation iterations. I mean, Steve and I, we constantly do check-ins with, I would just say, community peers, right? So we've been very fortunate in our careers to be able to work with a lot of different community banks and financial institutions, and we have a huge network. Even people that we're not necessarily selling to, we can still go ask them, hey, does this make a difference in your business on a day-to-day for the bank? Commercial large enterprises, if we're able to do the following, does this make sense for you? Is this something you'd be interested in? What's your gut reaction to what I'm telling you? How do I solve for this problem? Or even go ask them about things that I don't know, right? I mean, like one of part of the reasons that I think we've done well is Steve and I are constantly thirsty for knowledge and learning. We learn a lot of different industries and the verticals associated and some of the challenges that they have. But we really sit down with, senior level executives, C-level teams, and really try to understand their businesses more, because the more that we can understand and listen to them and understand the challenges that they have on a day-to-day, the more that we can be creative in how we're actually approaching them, to bring them maybe a solution to their problem. So listening is huge. The start of building this business hasn't been easy by any means, but it's been a lot of fun in the sense that we get to be able to be dynamic and meet so many new people. And even if I'm not selling them something, I can still call people that I've talked to 6 months ago and just bounce ideas off of and just have that general dialogue. Dialogue is huge.
Yeah, learn it from your customers, Michael. That's a really good point, and not just asking them, how they make their money or what they do, like asking them the really hard questions, like asking them, like what keeps you up at night? Like what is it, if you had a wish list for something that you wanted to work, how would you want it to work? How would it be better if like this process, how would it be best? And just working back from there and seeing, is that something that's achievable? Is that something that we could deliver for them? Because you also, as you start a business, you can't think you know what your customers want. You have to know what they want. You have to know what is the persona of your customer and what is it that they need from you, because it's too competitive out there to kind of, hope you know what they want.
Yeah. So I love that continuous learning. So you guys are exploding at the seams, right? 20 people, adding clients, all these new things that you talked about that you're investigating, new partners, that sort of stuff. How do you set up that time for continuous learning? Is it you just catch as catch can, or do you build things into your calendar? How do you do that?
Yeah. So we were very fortunate early on with some very, I would say, key and strategic hires that allowed Steve and I to maybe take a step back from, the 20,000 things that happen over the course of the day as a startup and a founder. We can actually entrust in some of the people that we've made hires with and brought into our team and the family to be able to take some of those components on, so that does free up some time. We have huge amounts of trust and reliance on these individuals because they're proven operators. That's one of the things we kind of tout is we understand this business and we understand the industry. We want to show that we're proven operators. So bringing those people in was really helpful. In doing so, it let Steve and I also organically have the time together to be able to look at either new emerging technologies or address maybe what we feel is something that's not necessarily being hit in our marketing campaigns or how our messaging is working, or looking at the product details a little bit more. It lets us be a little bit more tactful with how we want to spend our time. And, we spend together hours and hours about a week, with each other, of course, but we actually set aside time at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week to actually just kind of debrief with each other and see like, hey, what's something cool you learned this week? What did you hear that maybe you didn't hear from someone else? What's a good article you read? Let's look at some cool things that are coming out. That we just actually just debrief and just kind of sit there and just talk about what's happening and how to be strategic next week. And that happens on a weekly basis.
And we just did that yesterday. I was like, I said, I don't really quite understand this. And Walt's like, I think it's like this. And I was like, all right, well, who in our network can we call? Like, who can we, ask, like what is the real thing? Who is somebody that's on there? And we really do depend and thrive off our network, and we're extremely grateful for that network. And, guys like you, Dobbin, everybody who's in there, we lean on the fintech cowboys, the bankers at Georgia Banking Company. I mean, just being able, that's what's one thing that's great about our office there is just, going to pick their brains, them coming over and asking us questions, and just really learning people to learn from. I think, we kind of live in this society where you think you got to know everything versus like asking a question to learn something, so it's been a benefit for us.
Wow, there's so much there. There's communication, there's research, there's hiring the right talent and entrusting them. But I love that point really of, we do live in a world. I was interviewing a candidate for a job and they were on the younger side. We were talking about organizational structure and hierarchy. And they basically said almost verbatim quote, well, titles don't matter to me because I have this thing called Google and I don't need your experience. And I was like, well, you are not getting this job. But I think there's this sense of I have all the answers. I can just Google it. I know it. I can read a book. I can watch an Instagram video. But it really is that humbleness, that humility to say, no, I can improve by learning from people who do this day in and day out. I really appreciate that perspective.
Well, fair enough. I mean, I know now at 51, I'm nowhere near as smart as I was when I was 21. So you do learn things over time.
I love it. Well, the other thing I just want to point out too, by the way, which is so great, if you've never started a company with someone, what you just talked about, I was getting sort of the reminiscent blues of like that fun of like, let's get in a room, whether there are cocktails or not, or we're at a, I used to, when I launched a company with a friend, we used to joke that our office number one was Fido in Buckhead, right? That was our place where we went.
Yeah.
We had a couple beers and we,
Yeah.
same thing, just debrief, talk. What are you struggling with? What did you hear today this week that's interesting? And it's that relationship, it's that camaraderie that I think is such a powerful force in maintaining that energy that you need, on this day-to-day grind.
Yeah, I think it's really hard for, I have a buddy who, has been doing a business by himself, and, he works with the Ramsey organization. I mean, you have to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. It's too much. I do really recommend having a partner. I don't know what it would be like to necessarily have multiple partners. I mean, that might get a little convoluted, but I think like, at least,
I can tell you it does.
yeah. I mean, we have a board advisor, a guy named, Sean Ward, that's just, he's a true confidant for us. And, so we do have somebody that we both trust and, bounce some of the more innate, but we have an attorney that we trust who's just amazing. Like, he cares about our business as much as we do. And I think that's important too, is you have to find people. And trust me, we've had some bad partners along the last 2 years too. You're gonna choose wrong sometimes. Sometimes you have to when you're young company. You have to, you can't afford necessarily the best of the best. I would say don't do that in hiring. In hiring, you can ill afford not to hire the best of the best, as Walt mentioned about our team. But I do think, a lot of people don't put enough into, just really leaning on and talking through. So, instead of Fido, we used to go to the bars all the time. Now we put a bar in our office. So there's many a nights of bourbon and whiteboarded and bourbon and pretty much.
Love it.
We love our whiteboard. I had a CTO tell me that if you can't whiteboard your idea to me, then you don't know it. And so like I really took that to heart. And so I always try to make sure that it's like I always can I really write this out? Can I explain what I'm trying to discuss with this person, because I'm asking them for something probably that's not easy, because I usually ask for hard shit. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. You can be un-PG. I love that, by the way. I've been hired. So I do a lot of outsourced executive work, and I was brought in to help this technology company as a COO, sort of a 6-month stint to help them sort of put out fires. They were just caught in this perpetual product fire situation, and then get them to sort of, all right, how can we take a step back, get out of the firefighting, and start to think about what's next for our company? And one of the first things we did, we had a product guy and a marketing guy, and we got shower board and put 2 entire walls of an office in whiteboard, and just would spend days in there trying to explain how do we put out these fires, right? And then how do we start to think about what's next and explain it? So you don't have to convince me. I love it. I think, and it's free. It's just to be able to throw a million things on the board, start looking for connectivity, erase it. That doesn't work. I think people need to spend more time together, ideating and putting things out there. I love the whiteboard piece. Well, I could do this all day long, and I want to be respectful of your time. So let me end with one question for both of you. Or I'll give you 2 questions and you can decide who wants to answer which one. But the 2 questions are, how do you define, living and leading with your passion and purpose? And then what advice would you give for others that are trying to find that passion and purpose? So you guys can decide who wants to tackle which one.
I'll go with the advice one. How about that?
Good.
So the advice I'd give to entrepreneurs who are either thinking about starting up or in the thralls of it all is really remember the difficult times that you're going through right now, and really take the time to appreciate them. This is actually something Steve shared with me numerous times. but like, we yell and bicker at each other like we're a married couple. We argue about things. We get down on ourselves. We try up every single day by solving small problems or even big ones for that matter. And all of these things that we do on a daily basis, whether they seem really, really minuscule, not that big of a deal, to all the big items and where we're feeling like we have big wins or big losses under our belt, all those things are really, really important to enjoy and really appreciate the time that you're getting right now with your business partner as you're growing your business, whatever that may be. Is really appreciate the time that you're getting right now to be able to do that. Because when you look back at it and, ideally with success and you're like, oh, I'm going to go sell this company and, I can be a C-level executive and I don't have to necessarily have to be in the office 55 hours, 60 hours a week. And I can kind of maybe autopilot. You're going to miss the fact that when you were in the trenches with your best friend, working on things together and having a good time, even if you're yelling at each other half the time, it's still great. And I appreciate those things a lot. And also say that, from a personal life work balance and type of thing, don't forget about your passions. Don't forget about your hobbies. Sometimes it's really, really hard to peel yourself away, but I'm a firm believer that if you can even take a day, 24 hours where you can just kind of unplug and enjoy some of the things that you really like, it does help you, I think, really refocus and recenter what you're trying to get accomplished and maybe even, solve the problem that you couldn't figure out because you had, a mental block. Things like that really happen organically, and you have to give some of yourself that time with it. So working out in the morning, going for a run in the afternoon, going fishing and camping over the weekend, doing whatever that is, you have to spend some time with yourself and just kind of unplug a little bit.
I love there's so much there. And I have found sometimes when I'm in my busiest or most stressed, I'll go to an 11 o'clock movie on a Tuesday and just be like, totally unplug my brain, be entertained. And you're creating that space and letting your neurons connect with each other. Sometimes living in the Finger Lakes, I'll do a Tuesday wine tasting, go out and get a couple wineries and,
Absolutely.
explore the Finger Lakes and do something different. But I love that celebrating and enjoying the hard work and also finding that space. Walter, thanks for sharing that. Steve, what do you got for us?
Yeah. So one other thing too, I was like, when we first started, I said, one thing, every entrepreneur has to learn is to get really comfortable in the uncomfortable, because it is, not knowing, when you have to get up and work, your tail off every day and you don't know exactly where that dollar is coming from and how you're going to support yourself and your family. That's real stress. That's stress like you've never had. So if you're not doing the things that Walt's talking about, it'll topple you and it'll get the better of you. And so, as an entrepreneur, you can never be comfortable with anything except for the fact that it's always going to be uncomfortable. And other than that, don't ever find comfort. But I think you have to be really passionate about what you're going to decide to do, whatever that business is. One is there's 10, maybe 100 people behind you trying to do the same thing. So if you don't have a great passion, you're not going to find the success because the person with the passion behind you is. The one thing I always knew that I could bring to the table was I know that I can control how much effort I give to something. And for me, I have to leave all my effort on the table. And for me to give all my effort, I have to have the passion for what I want to do and what I want to achieve. And for me, it starts with, having a mission to, partner with, a good friend, somebody who's like, we've done this before. Like we're really good in the yin and yang of like what Walt knows versus what I know. And I think we bring each other a nice compliment, but also the passion of the people that we work with,
Yeah.
I read something that somebody said, you don't want to work with you don't want your team to be your family. You want them to be a team so that they can make each other better. Sometimes families just allow things to happen. I will say that I feel like we're an incredible team and we built that through a lot of love. So you don't want to call that a family, that's fine, but we're definitely going to call it a team that loves each other and cares about each other and picks up each other. And, to love each other right means you have to say the hard things to somebody sometimes.
Yeah.
And people forget that, love isn't about being easy. Love's about, telling people what they need to hear. And so I think all that mixes into, finding your passion and know that you're going to hear things about your passion that you don't like. You're going to tell people about your passion, and they're going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. What is that? I mean, I can't tell you how many times Walt and I still talk to people, and they're like, I don't understand what the hell it is you guys do.
You're like, it's okay. Just sign up for the contract.
Yeah.
We're gonna take care of you.
Yeah,
We're gonna take care of you.
Well, we're better at the client. It's more like investors and outside people. But we, it's funny with our clients, like and our banks and our partners, they, people either sometimes get it or they don't get it. But I would tell anybody, like, if your passion's right, and I would test that too, make sure you're not just passionate about something, being passionate about something is not going to make your money, but being passionate about something that's right is going to get you happiness for sure. And then maybe the money will come, but you have to be really happy in following your passion, because if you're not going to be good at your passion.
I love it. You got to fill that gas tank. Well, guys, I truly appreciate your time. It's great to see you. We need to catch up again in Atlanta, but thanks for being on today.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, let us know when you're
Appreciate
here. Love to see you, man. We're due for a catch up for sure, man. Thanks for having us.
We are
really appreciate you.
Yeah, and how can people find out about Next Moves?
So nextmoves.io, and look us up or hit Walt and I on LinkedIn. My name's easy. It's Nigri. It's the only one on LinkedIn. So if you can't find me, you're not looking. So it's
excellent. Well, thanks, guys. And this is the Walk On Podcast. People leading with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks.
I was hanging around when you noticed me looking at you. Well, I've been staring for